You're listening to The Main Event with Zach Gelb and Mike Zahn on WHIP.
11:16 is the time here in the WHIP studio. Zach Gelb and Mike Zahn here with you. We're getting you ready for the NCAA tournament. We'll tell you all you need to know about your bracket as you try to win some cash money, baby. But more importantly, the Temple Owls are going to the NCAA tournament, and they'll play on Friday. We'll be on the call as the Owls battle up against Iowa. And now joining us on the hotline is the former head coach of Hofstra, now an analyst with CBS, ESPN, and SiriusXM, and that's the former coach, Cassara. Coach, Zach and Mike here in Philly. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How things in Philly?
Well, we're doing great because we thought we would be in a car today going to Dayton, and no one wanted to be in a 9-hour drive to Dayton as we thought the Owls would be in the playing game. But yesterday, the American Athletic Conference coach gets 4 teams in the NCAA tournament. It seems like that conference finally got some respect.
I think it's one of the real storylines today as you analyze the bracket and look across the board. The American Conference got a lot of respect and, certainly came down to that last game, the UConn-Memphis game. So across the board, they got a lot of respect. 4 teams in. I think the Atlantic 10 and the Mountain West right now are kind of scratching their heads.
How did Tulsa get in? Because I just don't understand that one.
I don't know. I mean, obviously the committee is going to give you a lot of analysis and feel like they were the best team. And listen, they're a good team. Let's not take anything away. I think what happens this time of year when people don't get in, you start pointing fingers and saying, hey, they're not a good team. They're a good team. They have good guards. Frank Hayes has done a nice job, and they're the type of team that they get the right draw. They can win some games, but I think their body of work across the board versus a team like a St. Bonaventure, just makes me scratch my head, and I feel for those kids at St. Bonaventure because that's a team that I actually covered a few times this year, and I think should be in the tournament.
And we know that feeling just covering Temple basketball of a year ago of not getting in the NCAA tournament when you probably should have when you look at a team like St. Bonaventure. But shifting the page to the Temple matchup coming up on Friday, it's going to be Temple and Iowa. Give me the scouting report on Iowa, and why have they struggled so much down the stretch?
Well, I think they hit the wall a little bit, and sometimes, I mentioned this the other day in one of the broadcasts I was doing, that maybe losing early in the conference tournament helps a team like Iowa where they can go home, kind of refocus, take a couple days off. This time of year, you've got to be able to rest your bodies and rest your minds a little bit and refocus. So maybe that helps a team like Iowa. So I think Temple is going to have their hands full for sure. It also could work the other way. They could have totally hit the wall and not been able to regroup. So it's going to go one way or the other. This is a team that, arguably for parts of the year was a top 5 team, top 10 team in the country, shot it well, played defense, very well coached in Fran McCaffrey. So going to be a really interesting, first few minutes of that game to see how Iowa comes out of the gates. And Temple's going to have their hands full. But, hey, they're excited to be dancing. I know you guys are. And certainly, Fran Dunphy and his crew will be ready to play. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
We're talking to former college basketball coach at Hofstra University and now college basketball analyst, and that's Cassara. And Coach, did you catch Joe Lunardi's rant on ESPN last night about how he felt about the selection committee's choices? And then, in your opinion, who are some of the teams that you think got snubbed, and who are the teams that are really lucky to still be playing in the big dance?
Well, I love Joe, and I loved some of his rant, and I loved some of his Twitter feed, just flat out saying the committee got it wrong. And I have to agree, this is one of the years where I really scratch my head and just don't really understand some things. To answer your question, Syracuse really shocks me. Michigan, I think is right on that bubble line. Tulsa and Syracuse, though, would be the 2 teams that I don't think deserve to be in. Michigan would probably be the 3rd team, although I think they're good enough, but they've had a lot of injuries, and I'm not sure that they're one of the best, 68 teams. So I agree with Joe. I think the committee missed a lot of things. I think St. Bonaventure should be in. I think Monmouth should be in. I think those are teams that did enough throughout the course of the year. And I think the one thing that really puzzles me is almost a flip-flopping of the importance of conference tournaments. I think in some ways you look at leagues and say, hey, they really value the conference tournament, and some leagues just say they didn't. So that's the thing that really makes me, question where the committee was.
So now switching gears from teams that were on the bubble to teams that are seemingly going to win it all, like most years, there is no real number one consensus team that will win it just because of the nature of how March Madness works. But a lot of experts and some fans are looking at Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks to win it all. Do you think the Kansas Jayhawks have a pretty good shot at cutting down the nets at the end of April in the end?
They have have the potential. They certainly have the roster to do it. They have the coaching staff to do it, and they have some experience. So all those things this time of year lend themselves to getting to the Final Four or maybe cutting down the net at the national championship. But as you mentioned, nobody really was able to kind of run away with this thing this year. So, Kansas is a team that could find themselves struggle through the first couple rounds if they don't play really, really well. And I wouldn't be shocked to see 2 or 3, completely off the charts teams in the Final Four this year. It's that kind of year. But it also could swing the other way. There are some teams that are playing well, like in North Carolina now, like in Oregon now, that, may just find their run a little easier than people think to the Final Four.
A team that people will look at here in Philadelphia and will say maybe they could be cutting down the nets, being a champion in April, will be the Villanova Wildcats, who at one point were number 1 in the country right before they did play the Temple Owls. Ever since Reynolds got them to that Final Four, Jay Wright and his squads have been having a few early outs and not getting past the first weekend. What makes this Villanova team different this year compared to other years?
Isn't it interesting? They lose kind of a heartbreaker last-second shot to Seton Hall, and now they're like, oh, they're not going to make it. They're not a number 1 team. It's, they win that game. They're probably, being talked about very differently right now. They're playing very well. I like Jay Wright's team. I think they're really, really good. I think they don't get the credit they deserve, because, they've stumbled a little bit at this time of the year. But I wouldn't count them out. I think they have a Final Four type of roster and a run in them. So, they ran into a very hot Seton Hall team. They could have very easily won that game and been Big East champions. So, I would circle the Villanova Wildcats quite far along in this bracket.
Just being a New York guy like I am, there was nothing like growing up as a kid and going to the Big East tournament, and I was sad when the Big East, as I knew it, really broke up. It was fun to see that Big East championship game, though. It brought back some old memories, Coach.
It was. It was a really good game, and especially because you had, quote-unquote, 2 old Big East teams in it. It wasn't Creighton and DePaul final or something like that. That wouldn't make sense to a lot of folks who did grow up watching the Big East. Certainly didn't have the buzz early on in the tournament, but it got it at the end with a great Seton Hall Villanova finish. I really enjoyed watching that, and I think a lot of diehard Big East guys like myself certainly did as well. Staying
in the Big Five, it was fun to see St. Joe's cut down the nets in the A-10 tournament. Their second time in the last third year they beat VCU, and the real difference for them has been the play of Isaiah Miles. How do you like this St. Joe-Cincinnati matchup to pan out?
Miles and Bembry 1-2 punch is just tremendous. I had them very early in the year up in Mohegan Sun in a tournament for ESPN, and I was shocked that they were kind of picked as low as they were in the preseason. And I thought, wow, this team's really good. I think Bembry's a pro, and that team has just done nothing but win, and they're playing very, very well right now. So a lot of congrats to Phil Martelli and his staff. They've done a wonderful job there, and they have terrific players, 1-2 punch, some young guards, and a team that, I think will give a lot of people trouble. I would, that 8-9 game is tough, and if they win that first one, I like them maybe potentially even in the Sweet 16.
And there's a lot of really good 8-9 matchups, as always, and that's why it's the closest matchup there is. But when you look at some teams that could maybe bust some brackets, do you look at a team like the Northern Iowa Panthers?
So funny you said that. I said that in studio last night in New York on Pix 11. They asked me for my sleeper team, and I said Northern Iowa. Shaka Smart's my good friend, and I want them to win in my heart, but Northern Iowa is a team that shoots it really well. I mentioned playing well, beat a really good Wichita State team. They've beaten big teams throughout the year. Had a little bit of a stumble midway through the season, but that's just the course of a very difficult conference schedule. But I like them a lot. They're a Sweet 16, maybe even an Elite 8 type team if they shoot the ball well.
Wow, interesting as we're talking to Coach Cassara and wrapping up with him. So every year we have big guests on. We've had Seth Greenberg on, Shaka Smart, Iron Eagle, and right before the tournament we like to get their Final Four and then their champion. So this is where everyone listening right now is going to fill out their bracket and steal your picks. Tell us who your Final Four is and who your champion is.
Well, I don't belong in that list of very, very prestigious coaches and people on the list. Put me down the bottom, and don't trust my my picks at all. But I like Carolina. I like Michigan State. I'm struggling on the other side. I think the Northeast, as I am a Northeast guy, and the Northeast media bias is going to struggle to pick Oregon. So I'm kind of at a toss-up on that bracket. And, I still like Kansas as well.
Why did Michigan State not get a 1 seed in your opinion?
Who knows? I mean, I have no idea. Again, I mentioned the conference tournament. All they did was win the conference tournament. You know, and by the way, another sleeper team to me is Purdue. If Purdue can string a couple wins together, they have the size and some senior veteran leadership. I think they're a type of team. I had them early on. Matter of fact, it was in the tournament with St. Joe's. They're a Final Four type team if they can string it together too. But they just haven't been able to kind of punch through and be a dominant team as I thought they might be early in the season. But back to Michigan State, I don't know. I think they got the best player in the country. They've got, you know, arguably the best coach in the country, and there are two. I don't get it. I'm with Joey Brackets on this one. I really struggle with some of the things the committee did. I think this year they were off, but you know, hey, we've said that before, and teams that have come out of that, you know, first four and went to the Final Four. So hey, you know, they know a lot more than I do, but certainly going to be interesting couple weeks.
One last yes, no, and why kind of question for you before we let you run. Does Temple beat Iowa?
Tough call. I think a lot of the experts will give 50-50. I like the way that Iowa, you know, really is built and has a team, but I'm going with Fran Dunphy and Owls. How's that, boys?
Music to our ears. We appreciate it, Coach. I'm sure it's because you're on in Philly for that answer, but we do appreciate a few minutes.
You got it. Thanks for the call. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks so much. There's Coach Cassara joining us on the hotline, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. We'll take a quick break. Time in the WHIP studios is 11:28. And when we get back, we hear from an NCAA tournament member, a man that will be playing Friday in Brooklyn. Where's Brooklyn at? Devin Coleman will be coming up next.